Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Virtual Melt University. We continue to roll on. Amazing podcast, amazing lunch and learn. We just launched our new video cast, The Meltdown, covering the business of sports and the business of college sports. And speaking of which, you're going to get an amazing interview today from a very dear friend of mine whom I've just really grown to just really, love professionally and personally, and one of the brightest rising stars in the industry, in my opinion, but also his career path. We've broken bread. He told me about his whole path. It's an amazing path. I think it's going to be an inspirational path to our listeners today. John Talty, and he's a man that wears many hats. And it's and each title is an understatement. Senior sports editor, SEC insider, written some of the best pieces. That's where I first learned about him, is reading AL.com and his pieces on the SEC and the business of sports and the way he analyzes it, the way he breaks it down. Has been with the Alabama Media Group and AL.com, which is part of a much larger, giant media organization called Advance Media. But he leads a major sports team of dozens of people in the largest statewide news organization in Alabama, and from that perch, he's able to observe some of the greatest sports business that's going on in the state. University of Alabama, Auburn University. He's a regular guest on the Paul Feinbaum show, but he's also got a tremendous career path, which I think is going to be educational, inspirational, aspirational to our listeners today. He actually attended the University of Maryland. Go Terps, and received his degree in journalism. Also went through a series of great internships, and we talk about the importance of those programs, as well. But it also a tremendous path. He was working in New York, and he was working for one of his former bosses actually moved to Jackson, Mississippi, and we talk a lot about moving out of your comfort zone, pushing the boundaries, pushing yourself out of the comfort zone. We heard how Greg Sankey went from upstate New York to a tiny town in Louisiana to become the golf coach, and obviously that led him on the path to be the SEC commissioner. And John has a similar story. He rolled up his sleeves. He said, "I'm going to take a deep dive in there. I'm fascinated with SEC football. Obviously, Jackson is in a position to cover Ole Miss and Mississippi State as well. So I think it's going to be a tremendous story, and this is going to be a guy that you're going to want to connect with, because he is a star. He's a rising star, and I think it could be also inspiration is in this COVID and post-COVID world. Our students are going to have to scrap much harder for opportunities. It was already hard in our space, as John will attest, and I was attest, but going to be continued to be harder. So, John, welcome to Virtual Melt University. We're glad to have you.
Appreciate you having me on. Appreciate all those very kind things that you said about me, and hopefully, at least part of my story can help inspire and maybe encourage, some of your listeners to try out some different things.
Yeah, well, one thing we start with, John, is what we call the word passion. And when I went to Auburn, I had a passion for sports, and I had a passion for sports writing. And fortunately, I was able to combine that into a career in sports information, sports publicity, build my business. But when you went to Maryland, did you actually have a passion for writing, or did you have a passion for sports, or how did that first passion get ignited?
Yeah, I think I've always had a strong passion for sports, and certainly writing was a big part of that. And, I can tell you, I started writing professionally when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And
Wow.
So it was when the internet was just kind of, cranking up with these different sites, and you had, rivals.com and scout.com and these kind of recruiting based websites. And so when I was, I think, about 12 years old, and this is when, this is probably going to date me a little bit, but this is when, like AIM was still a thing. And so I remember going on every Scout website that I could find. I looked for who the publisher or main editor was. I found their like instant message handle and then sent them a message like, hey, do you need anybody to write for you? And I did that for probably at least 100 people. And wow. I think maybe 2 were like, yeah, fine, whatever, you can do it. And
So you had a 2% take rate, which is what we tell the kids. You got to make 100 casts to get 8 bites to catch 2 fish. So you just validated my percentages there. And the point is, but you can't get discouraged. You can't take no as for an answer, and NO's not the no, but not yet. And you can't take it personal. So you glammed on to the 2 of those 100. But you were also in the hustle early that age.
Yeah, and I think just who I am, I think I'm an ambitious person, and I think that I believe that like you kind of just have to go after what you want. It's not always going to be handed to you. And so I was just like, you know what, I'm into this. I want to do it. And fortunately, it's kind of funny. Again, I was probably about I was less than 5 feet tall at that point. I'm like 12, 13 years old, but like my voice cracked pretty early. So I had a deep voice. And so I would just get on the phone and I'd start calling these coaches and I'd call these recruits, and like, they didn't know how old I was and I didn't tell them how old I was. And so, I'm talking to, these guys who are the top football players in the country, and they're calling me Mr. Talty. And it's like, listen, if you had any idea that I'm a 12-year-old in New Jersey right now calling you, like, you would not be saying this, but like, that's kind of how it got started for me, and just kind of kept going from there, and just used that as really kind of the push to keep doing more. And so it gave me really a leg up, even by the time I got to Maryland, that when I went to the student newspaper, the Diamondback, where I went to the sports radio station, I already had a ton of writing experience. I'd already been on radio shows and things like that before I even got to college, and it kind of helped me kind of get a leg up on the kids that I was, in some ways competing with within just Maryland. And it certainly helped me. I got an internship my first year in college, and it was just because I already had all that experience, and that kind of led to the next internship. And so you kind of get that, it's like a snowball, rolling down a hill. Right. You get a little bit of momentum, and that starts catching. And, I think looking back on things, I don't think I would be where I am now at the age that I am if I hadn't gotten as early of a start as I did, and didn't kind of, start making moves and connections and things like that as early as I did in my career. I think it's still, I still bump into people now that I, first talked to when I was 13 years old. And, that's, now being 31, that's a long relationship that I have with somebody, and that certainly has paid dividends for me.
Well, you hit on such a big thing, because, and it's eerie how parallel our tracks are, because I was a student at Auburn. I'm driving Paul Feinbaum to his hotel when I'm 20, and he still had hair and a beard back then too, by the way, and continued to maintain that relationship while I was at Auburn. And obviously, one of my closest friends and business associates in the planet, one of yours as well. But talk about, because I want to unpack a couple things. You were always in on the hustle. You were always in on pursuing opportunities. You were willing to take and accept things that you may or may not have liked at the time. But we all, and we talk about this generation is somewhat into instant gratification. They want to be the CEO after 3 months. And you see a unicorn like Mark Zuckerberg, and you have an expectation that's always the way it's going to be. But it's just not like that, is it? John, clearly your path is one of grinding, paying your dues, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, accepting any assignment, because you can't raid the castle until you get the keys to the front door. Talk about your philosophy and share that with our students, because they want and need to hear it.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it's funny. I tell people all the time that I love being out of my comfort zone. And I've done it numerous times in my career. Yeah, but then whenever I do put myself out of my comfort zone, that first month or so, it's like, wait a second, like, why do I say that I love this? Like, this is really tough. But that's part of the journey, is that like, it is going to be tough. it's being out of your comfort zone for a reason. Like, you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be facing something that might be difficult that you have never dealt before. But every single time that I have done that, I always feel when I get to the kind of the other side of things, always so happy that I did it. I mean, you mentioned kind of what I did early on in my career. I was, in New York City. I'm from New Jersey. It's a place I knew well. And I decided to move sight unseen to Jackson, Mississippi. I'd never been to Jackson, Mississippi. Didn't really even know anything about Jackson, Mississippi. And that first month was not the most fun month of my life. I didn't know a single person there.
Right.
I moved in like late August. And so I jumped right into football season, didn't get a chance to meet anybody. I was living in this like rundown extended stay on the highway. Like, it was just, it was not a fun time early on. But I mean, I look to where I am now, and it's like, it's all part of the journey. And so I think sometimes you just have to take a risk at times, take a chance and just do something that in the moment doesn't feel good. But like, if you can see the path overall, I think it's a good thing. I also think that you have to show some patience into how the process is going to work out. I mean, I fall victim to it too, as well. Like, you might see,
right,
someone above you in your corporate structure, and you might think, I'm definitely smarter than that person. Like, why aren't I at that spot? And that might be a valid opinion, but you have to realize like there is kind of an order to things. And so what I think the best thing you can do is try to be patient, try to allow things to take its course, but also keep being aggressive about doing things to show the value you have to your company and show the value in the skills that you bring. Volunteering for things, I think, is critically important. I think a lot of people wait for the opportunities to come to them, especially if they're new in an organization. You don't want to step on anybody's toes, but some of the best opportunities I've ever had were not in any way offered to me. I just said, hey, I really want to do this. Like, basically tell me no. And typically I think bosses like that. I think they like initiative. They like when people, want to do things beyond just kind of what they're being asked to do. And that has helped me, considerably in my career. It's just going after things that I wanted and basically made my bosses tell me no. And more often than not, they said yes.
Right. Well, one thing that you just hit on, and I want you to expound on this because this is another big topic. It's like you're reading our script here. Failure is only the failure to try. So had you moved to Jackson and it hadn't worked out, but you're like, oh, well, I can always move back to the Northeast corridor. I know I've got contacts and relations up there. But what did you have to lose? I mean, if you got knocked off the saddle, you get right back on the saddle, you keep riding. But you said, hey, I'm going to push myself out of the comfort zone. I'm staying in this crummy extended stay hotel. I've never been in the South. Where the hell am I in Mississippi? But you had this feeling that, okay, this is going to take a couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, whatever, and then I'll get my sea legs and keep moving on. But so many of our kids are, they tell me, they're like, hey, I'm just mortified. And we're like, I'm like, hey, go try some things, particularly when you're young. You can afford, quote unquote, failure. I got fired from my first job, by Bobby Louder, Colonial Bank. I was on at 6 months out. Me at a bank didn't work. And then I was at we got just clobbered in a governor's election in Alabama. So, dude, I'm 0 for 2 out of the chute, but I'm like, I don't have a choice. I got to eat. I got to get back on the saddle and talk about that because I really want to encourage our kids, particularly now in this COVID and post-COVID world. I mean, they're going to have to really, truly push themselves out of the comfort zone, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, I think failure is going to happen for all of us. I don't think, you go out for a job and you don't get it and you feel frustrated, or, you run into a situation in which like you can't get a certain story or something like that and you get frustrated. And, I think one of the things that helped me is, kind of believing in some ways in the human spirit of people are willing to help you. I think one of my strategies early on, and I don't know if this applies to everything, but I think in journalism it did for me, was, again, I'm born and raised New Jersey, went to school in Maryland, coming down to Mississippi, never been there. And I used it to my advantage. I was like, you know what? I'm just a dumb Yankee. Like, tell me how this works. Like, teach me the ways of things. And like, was able to kind of find some mentors and people down there to kind of help take me under their wing And it simply was just being humble and being willing to kind of say, hey, I am a little out of my comfort zone and I need, someone to help guide me a little bit here. And I think I think people like those, kind of displays of humility. I think, I had a similar mindset as you, Vince, and that like the worst comes to worst, like you get shut down. Okay, whatever, life will move on. If I didn't know how long I was going to stay down here. I've now been down south 8 years, and that's 8 years longer than I ever thought I would be.
Right.
I kind of thought worst case scenario, this doesn't work out, and I move back to New Jersey or New York in a year. And that was kind of like, if that happens, that happens.
Right.
And that would have been fine, and my life would be very different now if that were the case. But I think that it just takes that. You know what? Like, and I think especially, I know that you probably have a, primarily young demographic. That's the best time to do it. I encourage people all the time, when you're young, it's the best time to take a chance. That's when, let's be honest, you probably, you might not have kids, you might not have a mortgage yet, might not have a huge car payment. You have that ability to move around the country easier than you might do when you're later on in life and have kids like you and I do, Vince. And, I think that's something that should, I think, inspire, the people who are coming out of college and kind of in the early workforce stages of their careers. Is like, that's the best time to just swing big. You want to move to California from Georgia, go to California, do it for a year, see and I think that's going to also help, you and your career. It's all about, I think, life experiences. And so I don't fault anybody for staying in one state. If that's what you're comfortable with, that's what you can do. But if I had only stayed in New Jersey and never left, I would have much less understanding, not only of just how college sports work, but how this country works. I'd never spent any time really in the South. And so by living now in Alabama and Mississippi and visiting all of these states around the country that, my work has taken me to, it's given me a lot better understanding of just kind of like how people work. And I think that's very valuable in what we do. And so, I think there are a lot of kind of, unintentional in some ways benefits of being able to put yourself out of your comfort zone, be willing to accept failure, and be willing to ask people for help when you need it.
Right. Well, and you hit on a good point, because in hindsight's 2020, but this period of their 20s is when you can go, and I have, a little bit of regret about it. My path wound up working okay, but I spent 3 summers in Montgomery, Alabama. Probably should have, gone to New York, LA, or whatever, and then moved directly to Birmingham, because that's where the job was. Which, again, your path is your path. But when you're in your 20s and you are unencumbered and, you don't have responsibility for anybody else but you, go get in the tumble cycle. If you want to move to New York, you can afford it. You can, you want to move to LA or Dallas or Houston or where the jobs are, Atlanta. So I think you're spot on. And also in your journey and in your path, and you and I are kind of a poster child for that. Talk about the value of cultivating mentors. Talk about the value of continuing to cultivate and nurture relationships and networking. And what we tell our kids is that the first 2 letters of relationship and reciprocal are RE. You've got to continue to constantly, groom and nurture and maintain your relationships. And like I said, I reached out to you, you hit me back. We had mutual connection with Feinbaum. I've been reading your stuff. And then all of a sudden, like, you and I, hell, I don't even think it's been, 2 years, a year and a half. We've become very, very good friends and professional colleagues and want to work together in the future. But talk about, from your perspective, the value that this brings, particularly in your role. I mean, you have to cultivate relationships at the highest level.
Yeah, let me unpack that in a couple different ways. I think first, let's use you and me for an example here. And I think this is a good way of possibly cultivating and maintaining a relationship. You and I send each other articles and things that are happening all the time. It's like, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see that? It's a very natural way for us to talk without you asking me for something and I'm not asking you for anything. And I think that's one of the really important things about maintaining a relationship. I think sometimes especially if you're young and you just don't know better. And I fell into this when I was young at times too. You only go to somebody when you need something. And it becomes very transparent. If I'm only hearing from someone when you need something from me, well, that's not a relationship. That's a one-sided thing. And sometimes that works and sometimes you have to do that. But your best sources and best relationships are going to be people that you have a legitimate relationship with, and that you're coming to them with things. Hey, did you hear this? Like, this might be interesting to you. Or, hey, that person's a father. Happy Father's Day. Like, I hope you're having a great day, and I hope that everything's going well. Finding natural ways to talk to people so that it doesn't feel like it's just a business relationship. It feels like, hey, I actually have a connection to this person. About the mentor thing, I think it's critically important. I think I've probably said that a few times now, but I know just taking my path from New York to Mississippi to Alabama, I can tie it back to really one person. And certainly, he's not the only reason why I am where I am, but he helped facilitate all of those different moves for me. And it's kind of helped put me in a position where I could be successful. It's so important, I think, in a company to have someone who's willing to vouch for you, someone who's willing to push you for opportunities. And it's a two-way street. I think you have to prove yourself to get that person to be your mentor, to get that person on board. You have to prove yourself that when you get those opportunities, you will deliver. And that's one of the things that really helped me, was that I found someone who was willing to kind of take me under his wing. And when he did, I delivered for him, so that the next time a big thing came around, he said, you know what, I can go to John. I know he's going to deliver on this. And then it happened, and I delivered again. And so at a certain point, it was beneficial for him. It made him look good that I was involved with him. And so you have to try to provide value to people. It's not always going to be purely out of the kindness of their hearts, though it's great when it is. But, some of your best mentors, like, they want to be able to say that, hey, I helped produce this person. I helped develop this person. And so if you can deliver for them, I think they're going to be even more willing to push you and try to promote you up the ladder. And some people say it's finding your rabbi, finding your mentor, whatever you want to call it. It's you got to find that person that, in this challenging world we all live in, that's going to, be willing to really help you. And sometimes that happens in college. Sometimes that happens in your first job. Sometimes it happens when you're 35. It can happen at all different stages of your life. But I think having that person will be really critical. Having that person you can bounce ideas off of with no judgment, I think, has been really important for me and has been very beneficial to me. And so all of the things you said there, Vince, I think are so important. I think people sometimes know they need to find those things, but don't always know the path to find them. And so it might be different for everyone. But sometimes, one of the things that helped me is, I remember working in one of these newsrooms, and there was, one of our reporters there was very well accomplished. And, I just was kind of a little bit in awe initially. And it was just like, I just went up to him and said, hey, can we grab lunch one day? I'd love to just pick your brain. And more often than not, they're going to be like, honestly, just like happy that someone wants to talk to them about it. Like, most people love talking about what they do. And so that's been really helpful for me. It's just like, hey, being eager to try to talk to someone about their path and, maybe the ways that they can help you in the future. And, more often than not, it's been helpful for me.
Well, you talked about a couple of things. And one is that everybody really wants to help. And everybody's got a story, and everybody, you never know what somebody else is going through. So if you reach out to them and say, hey, I just like, buy you a cup of coffee, buy you a sandwich, want to learn about your journey. How can we work together? And again, you and I are sort of the poster child for that. I'm like, hey man, I love your writing. And how can I help you? With sources and things of that nature. And then back, you got a great business brain, it's a writing brain. I'm like, hey, I want to pitch some of my wild and crazy ideas off of you, and you'll tell me the truth and all that. And the other thing is that providing value, and John, one of my pet peeves is when, and I'm sure you get this as well, is that a lot of people reach out, not just students, but a lot of people reach out, and to your point, they just want something, or as opposed to saying, hey John, love your writing, love your career, love your insight. I'd love to connect with you. I'm aspiring journalist and a student, and I'd just love to start building a relationship with you. And then over time, and by the way, this is anyway in personal and professional relationships. Over time, then those those fruits and those benefits pay off. They show themselves, they present themselves, and then those opportunities. And so I want to segue into, and we love to hear these tips and tricks from the pros and the experts. But if somebody is tracking you down through your email or an article you've written or a blog or LinkedIn, what things get, now you're on the other side, what things get John's attention if a student or somebody is reaching out to him? Because I know you do respond like I do to pretty damn near everything that somebody will write to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if in general, if you're somebody in the field, I think it's somebody like, if you're, say, a person who works in an athletic department, it might be, hey, I saw your thing, and I think it's really interesting. Like, I'd love to connect at some point. We can talk more about it. And that is like what I said. That's providing a value. Oh, hey, here's somebody who works in a field that is not my direct field, that maybe they can teach me something about it. And so I'm always trying to learn myself. I think when it comes to students, I think it's an openness. I think it's one of the things that sometimes is funny is, and I've been there as a student where you're going last minute, but sometimes people will reach out to me and, it's like, hey, I need to talk to a journalist for my class. Would you be willing to talk? And I'm usually like, yeah, sure. And like, okay, like, well, the thing's due tomorrow, so can we talk today? And it's like, okay, man, like,
really?
Like, I would love to help you, but like, I do have a job. And so like, give me a little bit more of a window there. And so I think it's always like, hey, this is due in a month, reach out to me earlier. I generally try to be helpful to everyone who reaches out. I think having a good email subject could be helpful, and sometimes it's just like, it's just being honest. I think it's, if you can add some sort of personal detail that, hey, like, I saw you're from New Jersey, like, I spent time there, whatever, something where, like, you don't want to feel like you're getting a form letter from somebody. And I'm sure you've gotten those, and I know I have too, where it's like, all right, you clearly just emailed like 50 people at the same time, and I'm just one of them, because it's just, there's nothing like, everything's just generic in this.
Right.
email.
Right. Because that means we say it's only as important as you make it. They put no effort in there. That's a signal. That's an audition. And then the other thing is, like you just said, no consideration of your time. Hey, I know you're not busy or anything. I've got this due tomorrow, and you're like, really? I mean, and they're showing you what type of of employee that they would be down the line. So I tell them that all of these interactions are rolling in live auditions, which you're hitting on now.
Absolutely. And sometimes, if somebody emails me, I might look them up on Twitter and see some of the stuff they've done and try to like give them help. One of the things that I actually do really like is that, if you can be specific, like one of the things that I kind of enjoy doing, especially when I have the time, is that like, if somebody says, hey, I really like what you do, or hey, like, I see that you're the editor of, AL.com sports team. Like, I would love to work there for one day. Here's 3 of my stories. Would you be willing to look over them and maybe give me some notes? Like, that gives me something very constructive that I can do. Okay, like, you want to know specifically how you could have made these stories better. And that's something that's kind of, I am an editor, so it's, I view that as a very easy thing that I can do to help someone. And it kind of takes a very broad thing, like, how can I get somewhere? It narrows it down into something where I can give very actionable kind of advice and items to them to try to help them improve. And so I know that I used to occasionally do that, where I would send, maybe a writer that I really liked, hey, like, you have the job that I would love to have in 10 years. Like, here's where I'm at right now. What's some of the advice you could give me to get there one day,
Love it. That's the other thing that you hit on, is that hook. Hey, I just like to get a little advice from you. And then, then over time you continue to build that relationship. And so this is another segue from the perch that you sit on. And one thing that we tell our students is that, they may or may not recognize it, but you did and I did, is that the college is the ultimate professional laboratory. They are surrounded by the greatest set of opportunities that they'll ever have in their life, and shame on them if they don't take advantage of it. And one thing that we learned, particularly with interviews with Commissioner Sankey and Greg McGarrett at UGA, Alan Green at Auburn, Ross Bjork at Texas A&M, is that there's so many more new opportunities just within the athletic department now: mental health, compliance, name, image, and likeness, event safety, data analytics, and those types of things. From the perch that you sit on, uh, where are other opportunities that you see that you could encourage our students to go pursue and uncover?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a lot of really good ones there. I think that in terms of the journalism industry, things are always changing so rapidly. But I think having, certainly we saw for years this kind of boom in video, and all of a sudden, video was a lot more important. You see people who are very successful in social media, which became increasingly important. We're on a podcast right now, and podcasts are exploding. I mean, you and I have talked in the past about some of the money involved, whether it was Spotify with the Ringer or Spotify with Joe Rogan. Having some experience in the audio world seems to be very helpful right now. So that could be something as simple as starting your own podcast. It could be helping out with a radio station's podcast, getting that up and going. I think those opportunities are increasingly important. And I think that's something that can be very helpful. There's some organizations that just, might not have the bodies to do certain things.
Right.
So if you can provide value in that regard, I think it can be very helpful. We've seen stuff that you and I have talked in the past about, kind of whether it be Twitch or some of these other kind of video games, esports world. I think a lot of athletic departments around the country are looking increasingly at those opportunities. And so, having a real knowledge base and expertise in that world, I think could be very helpful for you as, more places invest in that. You maybe being their guy, their kind of liaison in that regard, I think could be a good potential career opportunity for them. I can tell you, going back for me in college, I interned. I think I had like 6 or 7 internships in college. It was a lot.
Yeah,
and
right.
I purposely, and I'm not saying this was the best strategy, but I purposely tried to intern in a couple different areas within, journalism. And so I interned at a TV station. I interned at a national network. I interned at a magazine. I interned at a newspaper. Like, I tried to find all these different things to hopefully make me more well-versed and have more skills, but also helped me kind of understand what I wanted. And because at the time I was like, maybe I want to do radio, maybe I want to do TV, maybe I want to write, and so working in all those different fields helped me kind of understand better and able to better pinpoint exactly what I wanted to do. And so, as people were thinking about, in college, what they should or shouldn't do, I think one of the best things I can encourage you to do is just try out different things.
Right.
I mean, you've told me your career path, maybe it's starting out volunteering or interning in a athletic department, sports information department. And then you might realize, all right, this isn't exactly for me. And then maybe you go to your boss and say, I would actually love to intern in the marketing department. And then you make that switch. Or, hey, is there maybe a booster you could connect me with who needs help this summer? And so it's all, again, it all ties together. It's all about meeting people and making connections. And so, again, to tie it up, it's putting yourself out there. And so college is a great opportunity to do that. I know there's a lot going on in college. Sometimes adding a job isn't always the most fun thing, or an internship. You might want to go out and have fun. And I mean, who knows how much anybody's able to do that this year. But besides the point, it's not always the most fun thing to do to add responsibilities when you could just be having fun. But when you think about it, when you hire somebody or I hire somebody, that's what we look at is what did you do in college?
Right.
What are the skills you're coming out with? And if it's only I graduated, that's usually not enough. And so,
right.
Maybe if you're from the best university in America, that'll help you get a job somewhere. But more often than not, we're all scraping for the same job opportunities. And so having something in your background, in your resume, in your cover letter that's unique based on something you did in college is very important for getting that first job.
Well, and you just hit several nails on the head. And obviously I'm dating myself, but I used to sit in the press box after an Auburn football game up until midnight, because we had to make sure that David Housel was the best at it, but we had to make sure that very last journalist or that writer got their story filed. And then, by the way, this is back in the old days where Charles Hollis of the Birmingham News had to plug his phone into this receptacle on top of this computer to transmit that back. And then we didn't even have fax machines. We were doing it like this Teleram, this burner machine that would burn like 1 page per hour. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to go back to the Fiji house so bad, and all my buddies are there and all that. But we had to finish the drill. We had to honor that commitment and that responsibility. But again, these guys have become my lifelong friends. Or if Brent Musburger or somebody needed a ride back to the airport and those types of things as well. So I mean, I think you encapsulated that as well. So as we close this fascinating discussion out, what are some? We always like to pick our guests' brains on some, not necessarily just traditional go-to forms of information, because we've shared, Sport Techie, Front Office Sports, Sportico, John Wall Street, Feinbaum, Sports Business Journal, D1 Ticker. But what are some of the books or the podcasts or some of the other go-to things that that your sort of go-tos? We've heard a lot. Several of our guests have even talking about like John Wooden in the and a lot of our students didn't even know who John Wooden was. But what are some of John's go-tos?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I remember, we had dinner and, somebody asked me, one of our other people at dinner with us asked me, who's your favorite writer? Who do you read the most? And I don't know if you remember, but I said, it's this guy, Brian Curtis at The Ringer. And he does, if you're interested in sports media in particular, I think he does the best job out of anyone about writing just really interesting kind of behind the scenes type stories. I've certainly picked up a lot of things. He's just an incredible writer. He actually wrote, as you probably remember, Vince, a great story about Paul and sports radio kind of during the pandemic. That's absolutely worth reading for anybody.
Oh yeah.
And he just does an incredible job. So I don't think he's someone who gets a lot of attention. He's not going on TV shows and things like that. He's just kind of a behind the scenes guy, but I think he does a great job.
Yeah,
you mentioned D1 Ticker. I mean, D1 Ticker for me is a must read every single day. It's one of the first things I read in the morning. Just a great way. And as you well know, it's the thing that ADs are reading every day too. And so it's a good way of kind of getting a sense as to what maybe are some of the important things that ADs are thinking about and talking about. I had, in terms of books, there are a few that I liked. I mean, I think maybe the cliche answer for me right now is, because I had just finished it not too long ago, was Bob Iger's book. And I think it helped teach me some things in just that, particularly during a pandemic, it can be easy to fall back on pessimism and getting frustrated. And it taught me, especially as a leader, just how much that seeps through and how the people who you manage and work with, how they kind of vibe off of your vibe. And so if you're putting a lot of pessimism out into the world, if you're complaining, if you're venting a lot, which if you know any journalists, we all love to do, is it can really impact the people you work with. And so to me, that really kind of forced me to think, I need to think more positively. I need to think more optimistic, because people kind of, it reflects off them. And so they are going to kind of get some of that. It's kind of like having a kid, if you're having a bad day, your kid kind of notices, and then they kind of have a bad day. In a grander scale, that's in some ways, if you're running a company and you're always in a bad mood, then like you're putting your employees in a bad mood as well. And so that's something that I think really took away, that something that we can all probably improve upon. So those are some of the big ones. I mean, you already hit on a lot of things that I read. And so I don't want to just repeat all of them, but I think those are some of the ones that I think about that might be a little unique for people.
Well, I like I said, I mean, you're also going to hear from a lot of our students. We encourage them to reach out to you, and we're training and teaching them on and helping them on the right outreach. But to our listeners, I mean, I think you see why that John is going to be. It is a star, is a rising star. I say he's going to be probably the next Paul Feinbaum, and I say that in a very complimentary way, just because of his insight, the relationships he's building, the trust he's building, the audience he is building as well. So this is going to be, a person that you're going to want to connect with and stay connected with for sure. So John Talty, the senior sports editor, SEC consummate insider, amazing career path at 31 years of age. I think you guys can see why he is rising up and become a very dear friend of mine. And I think we'll do some other exciting things together. But John, we certainly appreciate your time and your wisdom and your insight today with the students and listeners of virtual Melt University.
Well, I really appreciate you saying all that. And truly, I do encourage, the listeners of this, please do reach out to me. It's a busy time for all of us right now in college sports. But if I don't get back to you that day, I will absolutely get back to you at some point. Yep. And, I believe very much so in paying it forward. And so if I can help anybody in any way, I would love to do so. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me in the coming weeks.
John Talty, the consummate SEC insider, AL.com. Follow him because he has his fingers on the pulse of what's going on in college athletics and SEC football right now. Thank you, John.
Appreciate it, Vince.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.